that there were mixed signals between the CEOs of those 41 EMCs back to their mothership, and I believe that's what's got us where we are today as far as the confusion. But as of last week, the messages that I have received from the EMCs is that they were all opposed. I have not heard differently about that. Now, the Georgia EMC crowd, they're not out in the hall trying to kill this bill today, but they are opposing it, and this is what the official word is that I heard today.
Well, thank you, Senator. I just want to say the frustration and confusion from their lack of congealedness is some of my problems.
No argument. No argument.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Many days you'll see me in here where I'll go grab a copy of the codes to cross-reference, because it's very difficult to follow what a bill's doing when it references another code section that's not in the bill. On your amendment, lines 5 and 6, you say broadband services have the same meaning as provided in code section 50-40-1. Can you tell me what meaning that is and how this changes the underlying bill?
I'm not sure that it changes the underlying bill and the meaning, but the definition of broadband services was adopted by our efforts 3 years ago in SB 402 when we set out to move the needle on rural broadband. And so it increased the defined number. It was 10.1 under the previous law, and we moved that needle to 25.3. So, for example, if an internet company or an EMC were to go and apply for USDA grants through the DCA program that we established in SB 402, they would not be allowed to utilize state and federal funds unless it was going to deliver the broadband services at the new level of 25.3, which is very low for most of you urban guys and ladies, because you're getting hundreds of megabits per second. Us rural guys and ladies are lucky to get 3 to 5, maybe 10 if you're still on the old copper plant. So all we're doing is raising the bar, saying we want internet services to be at least 25.3. This doesn't require any company to put in internet services at 25.3, but the definition is being basically used broadly throughout the code section, in every section, and we've done that on other sections of the bills in the past.
Isn't this effectively the poison pill, though, that
No, sir, it does
prevents
not.
anybody that doesn't already do 25.3
No,
from utilizing these pole attachment relief?
no, sir, does not.
Yield for a further question?
I will.
Your Senate Bill 2 last year that gave EMCs the ability to compete in this area, they have no pole attachment fees to themselves. Isn't this one way to regulate the competitive advantages that we just gave them last year and they have not taken advantage of going forward? They're able to charge higher fees to their competitors that right now they weren't able to even compete against till SB2.
If you recall, maybe you weren't in here earlier when I was talking about the map. Did you see my presentation on the map? All right, so if you
how
recall,
necessary this bill is, if you ask me.
if time will tell. If you recall, one of the barriers that was thrown up in passing SB2 was that we did not want the EMCs to cross-subsidize their broadband business or their affiliates. So, in fact, Georgia law, as written in SB2, requires the EMCs to pay the same identical pole attachment fees to their affiliates as Windstream, AT&T, Comcast, or whomever is out there paying for their pole attachment fees. So the parity exists. Whatever one company pays, they all have to pay. The discriminatory language was put in there, and I believe that was at your direction, which I supported.
Sure. Final question. So that's the point then, that the lower we can get these, the more that it helps EMC's own customers on an even playing field, so they can get out there and their customers ought to be begging for these to be zero for them and for everybody else, because it's not any income they're losing. The polls are empty right now.
I see your argument, and you and I could probably agree on part of that in places, but I also would remind all of us that we're talking about private corporations and entities that have signed an agreement for decades, private agreements, just like you do in your business every day with private companies, without the interference of government to tell you what you should be charging for your service. Now, how many of y'all want to start doing that every day up here? We do not want to interfere with private business. If the private companies can agree and they've signed 10-year agreements like the senator from the 18th has talked about, or whether that's a 1-year agreement, whatever it is, hopefully they've all become professionals in negotiations. They've hired good lawyers like yourself to help them get through it, and they've signed the dotted lines. If it was so bad, why would they sign a 10-year agreement? That doesn't make any sense. You're talking about corporations like Comcast, biggest cable providers in the U.S. that have signed a 10-year agreement, and you're saying that was a bad deal? I don't know who their lawyers are, but I don't think that they consider that a bad deal. Should they want to lower that fee? Sure. I'd love to lower the price of a Honda car from the guy in Gainesville, but that's a private agreement between you and he.
But those private agreements are necessarily in the urban areas where it's presently served. What we're worried about is the unserved areas.
Absolutely.
So this doesn't interfere with those private deals. This helps the other areas that can't afford that rate because there's so much distance between the customers.
Not going to argue with you other than to say this. What I'm told, most of these agreements are year to year. Some are 10 years, some may be 5 years. I don't know. They're all different. The point is there's dozens, if not hundreds, of providers out there. You have internet providers, you have telephone providers, cable. You can look at a utility pole, starting at the top, 50, 60-foot pole. There may be 6 different providers on that one pole that has different services. And so all of those agreements are negotiated privately, not here in this building, and surely not by the PSC. We've never regulated the internet in the United States, and we're moving in that direction. If that's what the will of this body is, then so be it.
Do you continue to yield?
I will, till you tell me not to.
It's not my job. Chair recognizes the senator from the 21st for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, yield for a
I
question.
will.
First off, I want to thank you for all your years of hard work on this issue. You've done a great job. But is it not true that an EMC and a broadband provider could still partner together and that this bill does nothing to harm that partnership?
Yes, sir, that is true, and I hope we'll continue to see progress because of the passage of SB 2.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 11th for a question.
Will the senator yield?
I will.
Senator, it's not true that you and I both have served in local government before we received the honor to serve our districts in the Senate.
Yes, sir, I served an 8-year sentence.
Well, counting my years of service as a city councilman of 5 years and another 5 years as chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board, I think I also served my sentence as well.
You did your time.
Is it not true that as a local government official that complaints on providers, whether it's phone or cable, is probably the #1 source of complaints of constituents in rural Georgia?
It is, and that was the #1 complaint I've received for the past several years I've been down here. And let me just, if I may interject, because you brought up a good point. For a long time, I told the folks on the phone, contact your Public Service Commission because they regulate telephone service. It became quick and clear that the PSC had no authority and had no jurisdiction, and they told the constituents that, which was the truthful answer. And so the citizens come back to me and say, what are you going to do for me? And so that's when I started moving in this direction, and thank goodness we've made some progress, but not near enough yet.
Well, is it not true that the current leaders, city managers and county managers, would tell you privately that, or you know, would share their frustration with the lack of even responsiveness to those leaders from these companies in many cases?
Repeat the question. I'm not sure I understood it.
Well, I guess I'm just asking if you would agree that frequently, even now, that those providers are not very responsive to local government, even after the changes we've made in the last 3 or 4 years.
You know, a lot of governments, a lot of cities and counties have taken this issue upon themselves to resolve it because the incumbent providers have failed to do so. I'm an example of that. When I was a sole county commissioner in Lumpkin County, we wrote grants, and we were one of the first recipients of federal stimulus funds of $34 million from the federal government. And we also used some One Georgia funds to create the North Georgia Network, which is now in 8 counties in North Georgia. It's part of that blue right here in Habersham and Blue Ridge and Jackson EMC and Amicalola, in 8 counties in North Georgia. If it weren't for the locals, we wouldn't have that service we have today.
Is it not true, for one further question, if you will?
Yeah, I've got the red light here. So.
Is it not true that if your amendment passes, I will vote for the underlying bill, because I do believe in accountability and wanting to move forward with the rural broadband in Georgia?
Thank you. The amendment deals with accountability and reporting. It does not kill the bill, is not intended to kill the bill. If the House rejects this amendment, then I'm troubled by that. So please vote for the amendment. Mr. President, I'll yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. His time has expired. The chair recognizes the senator from the 31st to speak to the bill and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, it's sort of strange. I sat there and listened to people talk about this, and you know, it always kind of bothers me when a guy shows up in a slick suit, set of penny loafers, and he's got all the solutions for the problems out in the country. But I'm gonna run through some points here just as quickly as I can, so there may not be an order, but I think it's things that you need to pay attention to. First off, there's been a mention of monopolies. First off, let me say, if you want to call this a monopoly, just understand, and I'm going to go ahead and use the terms, okay? I don't mean to pick on anybody. Everybody's my friend in this arena, but Georgia Power was here first. And guess who they served? The metropolitan areas. They served the high-density areas, and that's where they set up camp. And the rest of the state did without. And then the rural electrification process took place, and the EMCs were the companies or the entities that went and served those unserved people. So if you want to call that a monopoly, I'll accept that. Now, relative to these rates, I heard an explanation about a fence earlier, but let me tell you how I see this. You know, you had the slide up here, 650 on one side and 21 something on the other side, and that you ought not to be able to charge that 21. This is like your neighbor saying, I don't think I'm going to buy a car. You've got a car, I'll just ride with you. There's a reason there's rates. He pointed out about how expensive these poles are. It was ridiculous to go put up poles whenever there were already poles there. Well, it's ridiculous for me to buy a car. If you've got one, I'll just ride with you. The other thing is, when you look at this sheet right here, and I hope it's a little bit fine print, but I want you to look through there. There's some associations on there, and there's some big companies on there. And it is true. Go look at the whatever you call it, the ledgers on those. They're reporting billions in profits, and I don't blame them. It's good for them. But now the EMCs have stepped up to the plate. This has been a struggle for, I can't say, it's possibly decades, but this issue is a relatively new issue. I mean, until Al Gore invented the internet, we weren't talking about that. So it ain't been all that long ago, but we've been doing without. The other point that I want to make is the EMCs are member-owned. So if the EMC was making $15 profit off this pole attachment, guess who it goes to? It goes to the people that owns that company who are members only because they're being served by that company. It's not going to some shareholder from New York City that's bought an interest in this and profiting. If you tell the EMCs they can't charge their rates, then what happens is all those members of that EMC get to pay more for their electricity. Whether they get this service or not, they'll pay more for their electricity. Now, I don't know, you know, around this place you can hear just about anything you want to hear. But I am told, as Governor Deal used to say, I am told, that the EMCs offered free pole attachments for 10 years if you'll serve my district, my area. And these folks came back and said, well, we can't do that. The reason they said they couldn't do it is because they ain't gonna do it. Within moments or, you know, days after an agreement was reached, assumingly in the Regulated Industries Committee or from their works, you know, one of these companies on this sheet right here was boasting about how they were expanding. They were spending money in rural Georgia. The places that I know of, they spent money. They went out there and replaced their old dilapidated equipment that should have been replaced years ago, and they say they're helping rural Georgia. But I can tell you most folks in the country still don't have internet. The other thing is, you look at that difference in those pole attachment fees that was up on the screen. Can you put that back up there? I think we need to keep seeing that. It's not my slide, but I enjoyed looking at it. It made me think about these things. If that $15 difference in the poles is what's holding up these folks from providing service to the rest of Georgia, I don't think there's a soul out there to complain about that. I pay about $300 a month for telecommunications. My cell phone don't work at my house. My internet, I pay for 6 megabits down to get about 1 megabit most of the time. And whenever I need it, it don't work. I don't think that difference in that cost is going to change my bill. Now, the bill sponsor made a very important point. He said this bill benefits no one. If that's the case, folks, we need to move on. We shouldn't have even started this debate, but we're here. He was talked about an arbitrator in the committee meeting. And now every one of you, myself included, except for this last time, I have gotten, with this gray hair, I've gotten just a tad smarter. But every one of you, there's a few that didn't seek re-election. But every one of you has to be here to be a policymaker, to be an arbitrator. Does it surprise you at all that the PSC would say, yeah, we'll bring us more power. We'll flex that muscle. And I also understand they advocated for one of the telecommunications companies that's on this sheet right here in the committee. Let me just touch on one other thing here. Should have may have touched it earlier, but talking about that exclusive territory, and just remember, the EMCs took the scraps. They took the scraps, folks. There ain't no monopoly. I've had telephone service. I've got what they call DSL. Man, it was fast. I used to have one of them things that the senator from 51 first talked about. The first modem I ever had was 110 baud. You could almost hear that data coming through. And I worked my way up. I think the fastest one I ever had was 56K, and it didn't really work. You couldn't get 56K through it. But I've got DSL now when I begged for it. They told me they did me a favor since I was a legislator. They put it in my community. I don't know how many people they can get off that thing. I'm told that if they'd put some more equipment in there, they could serve more people, but they don't want to spend that money because there ain't that many people in my community, thank God. But the telephone companies have been on these poles. They've been paying these rates. It's not until the EMC stepped up and tried to provide data for the rest of Georgia, the folks that, I ain't gonna use that term, but the folks that ain't been getting as good a deal or hadn't got anything. The EMCs have been working on this. They started talking about Ethernet over the power lines. They've talked about everything under the sun. They've tried to get data to their customers because their customers own the company. And they're just about there. They're making announcements. They're doing it. And all of a sudden, these big companies on this sheet right here says, ooh, we're going to have to get serious about this, else somebody else is going to be in there and there ain't going to be no use for us. So, folks, I would tell you this is a bad deal. It don't do any good for anybody.
Senator has yielded the well. For what purpose does the majority leader rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent that we limit further debate. That debate will continue for everyone who has signed up, but they will be limited to 4 minutes each.
The majority leader has moved that we limit debate to those that are already logged and to 4 minutes. Is there objection? There is objection. We will now vote on the motion. This motion has no debate. We will go to the board to vote. All those in favor of the motion to limit debate to 4 minutes each, please vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. As a reminder, we've waived the 60-second rule. Remind all senators to enter the chamber and to vote for the motion. Either yea or nay. Have all senators voted? We've got a thumbs up from the aisle, from the hallway. All senators voted. Thumbs up. Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 32, the nays are 14, and the motion has carried. Debate will be limited to 4 minutes going forward. Chair recognizes the senator from the 20th to speak to House Bill 244 and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I talk kind of slow, so I can't say a whole lot in 4 minutes, but I do want to rise in opposition to HB 244. I'm not on the Regulated Industries Committee, and I want to be sure my voice is heard on this issue. Before, I want to preface my remarks by saying I've got friends on both sides of this issue. Passions have kind of been high. I hope my remarks are respectful. They are intended to be, and I hope they're taken with the respect I intended them to be. When rural Georgia didn't have electricity and the Atlanta and the city folks had electricity, it wasn't the folks from Atlanta that came and and build out a network in rural Georgia to provide electricity for my constituents. Wasn't people from New York City that did it. Wasn't people from Wall Street that did it. It was the local community that did it. They banded together, they formed a cooperative, and they formed a EMC and built out their electrical system. Now, to me, that's a prime and perfect example of self-reliance and personal responsibility, which is an ideal that I believe in, and I think conservatives believe in, and I thought my caucus believed in. Self-reliance and personal responsibility. So now we're going to take something that's been operating really good, giving good service to their members. It's governed by a board of directors that is elected from the service area. It's a nonprofit, member-owned. The profits of the company are poured back into investing in the company, improving services. If there is a surplus of profit, that is repatriated back to the members, so all the money stays in the community. It's just a perfect model of self-reliance and personal responsibility, and something we ought to be championing here. But no, we're gonna put more regulation on them. We're gonna put them under the PSC. Let the PSC regulate them. Why are we doing that? Why are we doing that as conservatives? This issue's been wrapped in the banner of rural broadband. So if it's not for the kids, you know, it's for rural broadband. That's kind of the buzzword. Who in this room, who in this body really believes that the pole attachment issue here is gonna, if we pass the HB 244, all of a sudden we're gonna get all this rural broadband? I really don't think anybody seriously believes that. I know I don't. If I thought it would bring rural broadband to my district, I'd be the first one signed up, and I'd be up here speaking in favor of it. We talked about the Amendment 1, and why does it have a sunset? Well, amazingly enough, I had a representative of a cable company that I won't name called me Friday and said, you know, they needed to talk to me, that their cable company was going to expand broadband in my district. Just all of a sudden, just coincidentally. I think we need a sunset to hold their feet to the fire if this bill does pass. I think we need the transparency so we can know what's going on. So I ask you to vote, please, for Amendment 1 and vote no to HB 244. Thank you.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 28th to speak to House Bill 244 and the amendment. As a reminder, limit debate to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of this body, I want to point you to the lines, Georgia Broadband Opportunity Act. It's a great name. And it'd be great if I could go back home and tell my people this is going to create rural broadband. That would be awesome. It'd be great to the neighborhoods of 12 homes and the neighborhoods of 16 homes that I have that have 3 providers running right down the entrance of their neighborhood and refuse to go in there. And there are no poles. There's no poles. 3 providers. 12 homes, 16 homes, 20 homes. No providers. Three providers going right down State Route 16 from Noonan to Griffin. Setbacks in rural Georgia are not 10 feet. They're not 15 feet, 20 feet, whatever that you've got in Metro and in city of Atlanta. We've got bigger setbacks in rural Georgia. The cost of tying into that broadband is on that owner, on that homeowner. Quotes I've heard from my constituents, I've heard $8 grand, I've heard 16 grand, I've heard 24 grand. I've heard $33,000 to tie in. And I got 3 providers running right down the road. This doesn't do that. I mean, there's a lot of words we use around here to buzzwords, as we heard from the senator from the 20th. You know, we could say this cures COVID, and we'd probably all vote for it. But we know it doesn't, because if in committee, and if we had that back up there, you had the $6.50 and the $21.38. Well, guess what? In committee, that $21.38, we took it to zero. We took it to zero. We offered an amendment in rural Georgia, in unserved areas, you can go there for $0, and they opposed it. Why? Because it's not about the pole attachment fees. And we keep hearing about the FCC rate. The FCC rate only accounts for a portion of costs when there's storm damage. Think about Southwest Georgia. Hurricane Michael came through. Poles ripped apart, torn in half. And the FCC rate only allowed them to recoup the cost of the maintenance on those poles, not for the actual cost of that pole. So the FCC rate is antiquated, it's out of date. And this bill, I'll commend the senator from the 18th, I really will, because this is as good as I've seen on this debate. It really is. If it were truly about pole attachments, this would be the fairest way to do it. If pole attachment fees being reduced, we're going to build out rural Georgia, then this would be a good way to do it. But it's not. It's not, and we know it because they won't go for free. With that, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 7th. To speak to House Bill 244 and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. I know we've been here for a little while, and I know a lot of you have heard a lot of arguments this afternoon, both for and against the underlying bill. What I do want to point out, what I find interesting, is every senator so far that's come to this well, and a lot of the questions that have been asked by members in this body in opposition to the bill, I think find it interesting that majority of us represent rural Georgia. The majority of us represent the areas in which this particular bill is so-called supposed to help. The majority of us represent the constituencies where we've been trying for years to address rural broadband. And I can't go without commending the efforts of the senator from the 51st and the efforts of this body and others that have worked on this for many years. I too, like the senator from the 28th, do appreciate the senator from the 18th and his work on this issue, among others. Although he and I disagree, I do appreciate his efforts to try to come to an agreement. And I just want to personally say thank you and publicly say thank you for working on that. But it's been said a couple of different times where we find ourselves less than a year out from allowing the EMCs the opportunity to get into the broadband business and to create competition across this state in the broadband arena. Here we are discussing an issue to change the rules in which we set up. I think it's important that nowhere in this conversation have we even discussed about the cross-subsidization issue that we handcuffed the EMCs with in the bill last year. And the reason that part was in the bill is because the people that are supporting this bill wanted it in there. And if we truly want to address it and we want to put a fair playing field out here, I would argue that the current structure is a fair playing field because of those provisions that are currently in the law. I think if we really want to address it, we have to have a holistic conversation, and getting rid of the handcuffs is one of those things that I think we have to do. It's not even part of this conversation. Senator from the 31st brought up a lot of good points about the nonprofit entity that EMCs are versus the profit entities of the individuals that are pushing this particular bill. The EMCs, in fact, are member-owned, and they respond to their membership, and our membership elects our board of directors, unlike the for-profit companies that are pushing this particular bill and this provision and this underlying issue. And I find it more interesting, Senator from the 28th and the senator from the 31st both brought this up, the fact that an offer of $0 in poll attachment fees was made, and that was declined. Because we know for fact that at the end of the day, at the bottom line, at the real nitty-gritty of this issue's been around for a long time. We've been discussing poll attachment fees down here a lot longer than we've been discussing broadband issues. I just find it interesting that you would decline a $0 fee. And I agree with the senator from the 51st, and I signed his amendment, that broadband service should be defined, and we should have to have some level of understanding of what's going on. And if it's not happening, we should have to repeal it. So, Mr. President, with that, I know my time's coming to a close. I appreciate the work that a lot of people have put into this. It's a continued work in progress, and we're going to get there. It's going to take some time to fix the broadband issue in rural Georgia. But I don't believe the underlying bill does that, and I don't believe it gets us any closer to addressing the problem that we have. With that, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 37th to speak to House Bill 244 and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I believe we can say unanimously we all want broadband in rural Georgia. It needs to be expanded just as far as it can possibly be expanded for many reasons, not just COVID. I was touring Georgia 5 years ago as chairman of the Education Committee, and we went to Johnson County and was visiting in their school. We asked them about, well, what about bandwidth? They laughed. One of the teachers told me, also the administration, they said, if we need to get out on the web, we have to drive up the road to the crossroads so we can get a signal on our cell phone so we can get out. That's how poor service is in rural Georgia. I mean, I heard it all over the state of Georgia. But sadly, House Bill 244, as it's presented, will not accomplish that goal. Because let's get to the heart of this bill. This bill is not about rural broadband. This bill is about money. This bill is about big money, and it's about other people's money. You look at the dynamics of this bill. We're told that if we pass this bill, and this was the big carrot now, there will be $20 million committed to rural broadband by the cable industry spread out over 5 years. That's $4 million a year. That's a lot of money in anybody's pocket. In return, we only have to put the pole attachment fees under the PSC. And all future pole attachment rates will in time be set by PSC. This argument that it doesn't affect existing contracts, it absolutely does affect existing contracts because they cannot continue as they exist. It puts an end to that. It's been suggested that the existing FCC rates are a fair price. So what's the problem? Well, there's several problems with this. First is return on investment. Now, I'm just a ditch digger from Cobb County, and I might add, I was born in 1949. Electric power came to Cobb County 11 years before I was born in rural Cobb County, the part that I live in. That's when the EMC was formed, was in 1938. It was in 39 and 40 before it ever came to that part. My mother-in-law told me about it. She was out there then. But it's a return on investment issue. Georgia Power was not there. No other utility providers were in West Cobb County. EMCs were. They came. It was called the REA. My daddy worked for Southern Bell for 42 years, and he was an outside engineer. He worked with EMC, and they had a lot of joint use agreements. They've worked fine through the years. The problem is this. On return on investment, The first problem on return on investment is we're getting a $20 million benefit of promised investments. But guess what? It's costing the EMCs in the state of Georgia $27 million a year in lost recovery of pole cost. EMCs will give you that data, both individually and as a state organization. Now, I'm not very smart, but if you tell me I'm going to get a $20 million benefit, but it's only going to cost $135 million to get it, that ain't a real good deal. Secondly, the fact that all EMC customers throughout Georgia will ultimately be paying the $27 million a year under the provisions as currently calculated. Now think about it. $27 million a year to get $4 million worth of benefit. $135 million over 5 years. The $20 million benefit is going to terminate at the end of 5 years. That's as long as it's promised for. We have no map. We have no promise of what's going to be served. But the $135 million is the gift that keeps on giving back to the cable companies in rebated cost and decreased cost at the tune of at least $27 million a year and decreased pole attachment fees in all the years going forward. The $20 million promise is only for 20 years, is for 5 years. This is on the back of every EMC customer in the state of Georgia. And we were told this morning 81% of the people in the state of Georgia are covered with the EMCs. I guess I'll end. This is a bad bill. I think it's a bad bill when the people presenting the bill get to speak on it at end, and the people who speak against it get limited to 4 minutes. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 45th to speak to House Bill 244 and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I tell you, I've seen a lot of debate, and it's very impressive to see 56 senators, and probably every senator sitting in here could get up and speak so eloquently, either for or against this bill, and be such subject matter experts on it. And it is because year after year after year, we have listened to this debate, and those that have been in here for so long are very knowledgeable about it. But let me say, I am opposed to House Bill 244, but I do support the amendment of House Bill 244 by the senator from the 51st. But I did want to get up, and the senator from the 31st, you were so eloquent. I called Senator Hill the Silver Fox. I'm going to rename you in your last 4 days the Silver Fox, because you were so eloquent and spoke so fluently and so knowledgeably about this. And I rise because this is my last 4 days, last 3 days, or whatever it ends up being. But I want to say thank you to the EMCs. I want to say thank you to those linemen that we created a tag for. I remember taking care of them when they were electrocuted in the emergency room, those who survived. And thank you for putting in that last mile, because that is what the senator from Cobb County was talking about. I remember my mother talking about when she grew up in Milton County, which is now Alpharetta, which is one of the most urbanized areas in the state. And it was a rural area, and they used to run to the kitchen because they had one light bulb hanging in the kitchen, and all the kids wanted to go be able to read underneath that light bulb in the kitchen in Alpharetta, Georgia. And it was because of those EMCs that put that last mile in, because they didn't want to go past Sandy Springs and up into Roswell, into Alpharetta back then, because it cost so much money. They wanted to stay down here in downtown Atlanta. But I want to say thank you to them. And I am loyal. I am loyal to those co-ops. And if you've ever been to an annual meeting And I go to those annual meetings, whether it's Jackson or Walton or some of the other EMCs. And you know, you think that those people are going to those annual meetings because they might win a car, or they might get free ice cream, or they might get free barbecue. But I've sat there at those annual meetings, and there will literally be thousands of people there, and they're listening to their board of directors, and they're electing their new board of directors. They're very proud of their co-op, and rightly so, and that's why we need to support them and those 4.5 million customers. One of the things that I've learned from sitting in here for so long, and I hope I pass it off to some of you freshmen and some of you new legislators, you do not take that Hoover vacuum cleaner that I was talking about and vacuum up the dirt on the floor because you don't want to handle it and send it across the street to the Public Service Commission. Because let me tell you, when you send it across the street, they are not going to listen to you. I have been over there as a senator in a disputed case, and I was ruled against 5-0. You are not going to be heard. You are throwing away your power. And when you get all those constituent complaints, whether it's about the internet, it's about power, or whatever it's about, if it's about insurance and it goes across the street, the sloppy Floyd, you are literally giving away your power and your ability to be able to control it. So I say no. Do not send it to the PSC. It's not going to help you with these controversies, and it's the worst thing. Do not upset the apple cart. We supported Senate Bill 2. There's a reason why we supported Senate Bill 2. Give it time to work. Here you are coming down the thing, and you got a new negotiated agreement. Give it time to work. And I ask you to vote against House Bill 244, to vote for the amendment. But let me tell you, I'm not going to sit here, and if this amendment passes, I'm still voting against the bill. We have the votes in here to kill this altogether. Don't change your vote. Vote no, and vote no again. Thank you, and I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate your time and attention and everybody that has given this due consideration. And I can see from the looks on your faces that you have. To my good friend from Gwinnett, the senator from the 45th, I appreciate her comments. This is not about the EMCs being good folks and good workers and providing us good service. I told you that in my opening comments. I said they're good folks. The people that serve my house are good folks. This is not about that. Don't let it be twisted around and made to be that. The senator also said, don't upset the apple cart. Ask your folks out in rural Georgia, how's your broadband apple cart doing? Because your broadband apple cart out in rural Georgia ain't real good right now, folks. We need to change the model. We need to tweak it. We don't need to hurt the EMCs, but this doesn't do that. All it does is send it to the PSC so they can make a decision. I want to be respectful of everybody's time and try to go quickly, so forgive me. One of the comments made by the senator from the 51st was, I love capitalism and these companies make billions. Great. I want successful companies in my state that have good capital, that have plenty of money, that have good revenue, that are going to deploy broadband out further. We don't need companies that are on the brink and on the verge of bankruptcy trying to put out broadband. We need folks that are doing well. One of the questions, one of the comments was that the mapping will tell us where the unserved areas are. Folks, I know where the unserved areas are, and you know why? Because my constituents call me. They call me and tell me they don't have broadband or they have poor broadband. This is not about mapping. This is not about waiting on mapping. This is not about waiting on others to come tell us. We've got an absolute present problem of not enough broadband out into the state. The question of issue of hurricane repairs, and that the EMCs have to repair that. Of course they do. They own the poles, they own the lines, they own the infrastructure. Who do you think is going to repair for that? And factored into that, the cost of those repairs after the hurricane affect the rates that people who ride on those poles pay, because it is a cost recovery formula. If you have to pay to have it rebuilt, that's part of the cost recovery that you get. The suggestion was made by my friend from Dahlonega that maybe, well, the EMCs need to partner with other people. Maybe that's the silver bullet. Great, let them do that. Pass this bill and it will encourage that. Because now what you have is you have a more attractive partner that someone can partner with because there's fair rates that they would be paying to get broadband further out into the areas. One of the comments made was, don't let the PSC regulate the internet. Folks, this is one of those unfortunate scare tactics that has nothing to do with the bill. Nothing about this bill regulates the internet. It just says for companies that want to deploy broadband further out into areas where they're not now, it helps that. It's not about regulating internet. It's not about a lot of the things you've heard. And let me tell you why the amendment is absolutely a poison pill. You've already figured it out, but I'll point it out. It's the sunset provision. Now, many of you are business folks. If, in fact, you understand that the model is going to be tweaked so that the cost to enter and the cost to ride on the poles is only good for up to 5 years, how do you calculate your cost to provide the service to those areas in year 6? You can't. So are you going to make that your investment when you know that your costs are only capped or only going to be fair for 5 years? Of course not. So if you pass this amendment, what you will have done is you will have ensured that that folks that want to go out into the other areas, that want to continue this, in fact won't. That is a poison pill. The House wouldn't vote for it, and they shouldn't vote for it. Mr. President, I'm almost done. Some comments made by one of my friends soon to be leaving about riding in your car. Well, then the question is, why pay different cost? Why pay different cost? And he says, I am told, and it was told to you, and this is about my last comment. I am told, in fact, that they were offered 0 pole attachment rates. Y'all know where that bill is? I guess it's somewhere in the internet. Because it ain't in your book. It didn't come out of committee. It's not been printed in this building. That was an idea that was wafted around in committee, y'all. It was wafted around in committee as a suggestion because the EMCs thought that they were about to, in fact, have their attachment rates put at a fair rate. And then it was, wait a minute, we'll do it for free. That bill's not before you because it doesn't exist. I ask you, vote down the amendment. It absolutely has a poison pill that we all understand. Vote for the amendment. Give this a chance. Give rural broadband a chance. Give the companies a chance to have to pay fair attachment fees so that we can get more and more out to Georgia. It's the only chance you'll have in the last few days we have in this session to move the needle in the direction of more broadband. Thank you, Mr. President, and I sincerely appreciate the comments and everybody's patience during this lengthy debate. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the West.
State your inquiry.
President, is it not true that I misspoke just a few minutes ago? I'm opposed to House Bill 244, but I'm in favor of Amendment Number 1, and I misspoke, and I'm asking people to vote in favor of Amendment Number 1.
The question is on the adoption of Amendment Number 1. We're going to take up the amendment first by the senator from the 51st. Is there objection to adoption of the amendment? There is objection to Amendment Number 1. All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. As a reminder, the 60-second rule has been waived. Please make your way to the chamber and vote your machines. For what purpose does the senator from the 45th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry. Is
State
it
your
not
inquiry.
true
State your inquiry.
that on Amendment Number 1 that we need a green vote to support the EMCs of the state of Georgia? Is that not
I'm certain
true?
each and every member can make that determination on their own. Please make your way to the chamber. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? The hallway is clear. Have all members voted? Mr. Secretary, please lock the machine. On the adoption of amendment number 1, the yeas are 24, the nays are 27, and the amendment is lost. We will now take up the underlying measure, House Bill 244. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill? All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. For what purpose does the senator from the 45th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry. Is
State
it
your
not
inquiry.
true, since amendment number 1 failed, that we need a no vote on House Bill 244 for the EMCs of the state of Georgia?
I have all the confidence in the world with the members to make that determination on their own. State your inquiry.
Is it not true that if a $6.50 pole attachment fee was the solution to this, there'd be internet service on every Georgia Power pole in the state of Georgia?
Thank you for your passion. Remind everybody to vote your machine. Enter the chambers. Vote your machine. Have all members voted? We've got one in the hall. All members have voted. Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 31, the nays are 22. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of House Bill 576.
House Bill 576 by Representative Williams and the 145th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to courts so as to provide for the distribution priority of partial payments of fines, bond forfeitures, and costs, to provide for related matters and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Senator Albers, the 56th District Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety offers the following substitute to House Bill 576, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to courts so as to provide for the distribution priority of partial payments of fines, bond forfeitures, and costs, to provide for an effective date and for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 25th to speak to House Bill 576.
Thank you, Mr. President. I bring to you today House Bill 576. All this does is take current fees that are being charged in the superior courts and moves up the spinal care fund act and moves it from the 14th position to the 4th, and as far as priority is concerned, as far as fees and everything. So I yield the will.
Senator has yielded the well. Any other senators wish to speak for or against House Bill 576? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? They have. Mr. Secretary, please lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of House Bill 487.
House Bill 487 by Representative Bonner of the 72nd and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 6 of Chapter 3 of Title 38 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the Disaster Volunteer Relief Act so as to authorize certain employees of state agencies to be granted leave from work with pay in order to participate in specialized disaster relief services and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety recommends this bill do pass. Senator Albers of the 56th District, Chair. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th to speak to House Bill 487.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, this is a very short bill that simply expands the number of employees of state agencies that can work in emergency disaster relief. It's named after my father-in-law, Robert Argo. He's my wife Amy's father, and he was a member of the Civil Air Patrol, worked along the Georgia coast as they looked for German submarines in World War II. Later became a member of the Coast Guard, fought in the Pacific Theater, was a big advocate for Civil Air Patrol. This just lets people work for the Civil Air Patrol, train folks, work in disaster relief, and get paid leave from their state government jobs. Would appreciate your support, help expand our preparedness for disasters and response to them.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against House Bill 487? Chair sees none. Is there objection or agreeing the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Got a thumbs up in the hallway? All right, Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. I'm gonna just give stay close and dinner's been ordered. For what purpose does the senator from the 32nd rise?
Mr. President, I move that House Bill 1114 be taken from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of House Bill 1114?
House Bill 1114 by Representative Cooper of the 43rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 4 of Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to medical assistance generally so as to provide for Medicaid coverage for lactation care and services and postpartum care and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 32nd had moved that House Bill 1114 be taken from the table. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and it is placed at the end of the calendar today. For what purpose does the senator from the 5th rise?
Mr. President, I move that House Bill 661 be taken from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of House Bill 661?
House Bill 661 by Representative Marin of the 96th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act creating a new charter for the city of Norcross, Georgia. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 5th has moved that House Bill 661 be taken from the table. Is there objection? There is objection. All right, there's no debate on the objection. All those in favor of removing House Bill 661 from the table will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. For what purpose does the senator from the 45th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I am asking for a no vote on House Bill 661 to be taken from the table? I need a no vote.
Thank you for your passion. For what purpose does the senator, the minority leader rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that this is a local issue, an annexation only in the senator from the 5th district, and at least he should be given the respect of a vote? If people want to vote against the bill, that would be appropriate, but allow the senator from his own district to at least have a vote on the bill that was done because of a mistake in the local legislative committee that didn't properly put all the senators that represented the local legislation on committee. That's why we tabled it. Give him a vote. Wouldn't that be appropriate, Mr. President?
The minority leader speaks with great passion. All senators, please vote your machine. Enter the chamber and vote your machine. For what purpose does the senator from the 31st rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
So we've had placed on our desk a substitute to SB 303 that says access to quality health care offers the following substitute. There doesn't appear to be a House committee by that name. I don't know of a legislator by that name. We don't have a committee in this chamber by that name. So I'm just curious as to where that comes from.
Senator, the chair has no idea. All senators, please vote your machines. The hallways give me a thumbs up. Has all senators voted? We got one senator waiting. Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the motion to remove from the table, the yeas are 22, the nays are 25. This motion has failed, and HB 661 is left on the table. For what purpose does the senator from the 18th rise?
Mr. President, I move to immediately transmit HB 244 to the House.
The senator from the 18th has asked that Senate Bill 244 be immediately transmitted to the House, which we previously took up.
House Bill, excuse me.
House Bill 244. Is there objection to the immediate transmittal? Chair hears none, and House Bill 244 is immediately transmitted to the House. All right, here's the current posture. The Senate's going to stand at ease, subject the chair. We're going to take at least 30 minutes here. Just everybody reset for a little bit. Stay with us. We might have an update in 30 minutes, but just stand at ease for at least 30 minutes. Just everybody catch your breath. Certainly I need to get some blood back in my legs. So thank you very much for your patience.